to JLF's Brave New World Season 3. Our magazine partner for this series is The Week, journalism with a human touch. In case any of you missed our earlier session today, Srilaji, Shobha Day in conversation with Shonali Khuller Shroff, you can catch it on our YouTube and Facebook platforms. Our second session today is Getting There, Manjula Padmanabhan in conversation with Jayanti Naju Seth. Over a remarkably successful career, Manjula Padmanabhan has worn three distinct hats, primarily that of a playwright, cartoonist, and a writer of fiction. She is the author of several critically acclaimed books, including Escape, The Island of Lost Girls, and Getting There, Collected Plays Volume 1 and 2, bringing together the dramatic works of this Onassis Prize-winning playwright. For all of these, Padmanabhan has mined her own life and society around her for material that is insightful, often and always compelling. In conversation with academic Jayanti Naju Seth, she will discuss the creative process behind her latest collection of dramatic pieces, Blood and Laughter, Laughter and Blood, and her autobiographical venture, Getting There. Jayanti Naju Seth recently retired as head of the Department of English, Jesus and Mary College in New Delhi, and after a career spanning 40 years, she has also edited and published two collections of essays on Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice and on Marquez's Chronicle of a Death Foretold. Please do remember to ask questions and comment by typing it into the comment section below, and we'll pose these off our speakers this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, Manjula Padmanabhan and Jayanti Seth. Over to you, Jayanti and Manjula.
Thank you, Sanjoy. Thank you very much. And welcome, Manjula, to this virtual platform that we are having to get used to ourselves, I think, at this point.
I'd also like to thank Sanjoy. Thank you very much for that very warm introduction. And thank you, JLF, for hosting this session. And thank you, Jayanti, especially for being willing to talk to me.
More than willing, very eager to talk to you, Manjula. I'm thinking back to the late 90s when I first encountered your work. The first performance that I saw was of Harvest at the Sri Ram Center. And what was remarkable about it was that when it ended, there was an audience who were shocked, they were rapt, and for the only time that I have experienced it in a Delhi audience, nobody could clap for the first minute because they were taking it in. It was that shocking. So would I be correct, Manjula, in saying that this is what you do best, you pull the skin back, and what an apt metaphor for harvest, all about the harvesting of organs, but you pull back from the politesse, the veneer of society as it moves, and show the motivations and the actual, the workings of the mind just underneath the surface.
Well, I'm laughing because I seem to specialize in writing plays for which the audience is too horrified to applaud at the end. I have also been told by people who meet me, if they've only ever read my work, who meet me and who say with surprise, but you seem to be, a light-hearted person. Why do you write such dark things? Maybe we don't need to go into that, but it is true that Harvest goes to dark places, but I've often felt people who perform Harvest don't use the opportunities they get. They don't often use the opportunities they get for humor, because there is a fair amount of humor in the play. And I remember seeing, it was really a hilarious production in Italy, in Italian, in which the role of the mother was played by a tall, thin man. And the Italians, this young Italian team who performed the play, said they really enjoyed the mother-son relationship, because in Italy there's a big there's also a huge focus upon the very close relationship of mother and son and the codependency, and the wife is left out. And they said they really enjoyed that in the play. So my work often does focus on dark things, but I would say that there is a strong element of humor in everything I do, even in the darkest of places.
Yes, I can see that. I can see where that would be. Now, you've recently collated your works, and they make fascinating reading one after the other. They are alternately called Blood and Laughter, and the other one is called Laughter and Blood, which is the shorter pieces. And I would like very much to talk about them with you. But can we begin with your the autobiographical piece that you have just recently reprinted called Getting There? And I think if you're willing to do it, it would be a nice starting point if you would read a passage or two out of Getting There, and then we can discuss it.
Sure. So I'd like to set it up. I do actually have a copy of Getting There. I do not have copies of the collected volumes of plays because they were sent to the Delhi address, and I thought I'd be back in Delhi before before needing to have them sent here. But then, alas, we all got stuck with COVID. So to set up Getting There, it is autobiographical with there are some details that I have smudged over in the book, but otherwise people often thought that it was, or told me that they thought it was fiction, but it's not fiction. It is nonfiction, and it's set in Bombay of the mid-70s. At the time, I was living in a somewhat gracious home in Colaba, and I was a paying guest. And at the time, I had just started a diet, which I hoped would reduce weight, because I thought all my problems stemmed from being overweight. And at the time that I started the diet, the household, which was a formal household, there was a butler called Bansi and a cook. And the household became the home of two visitors, two giant Dutch men called Piet and Jaap. And I was concerned that they would disturb my diet, so I was inclined to dislike them. Anyway, in this scene that we're about to hear, Jaap and Piet have just returned home from a visit to their guru, and they have been completely drenched in the rain. I will apologize in advance. They speak with an accent, and at the time when I met them, I was transfixed by their accent, and you can see that in this passage. I realize that it's not politically correct, as Jayanti reminded me yesterday, perhaps to make fun of someone's accent. But for me, it was both hilarious and a fascination. And then after a while, when I became friendly with them, I just stopped hearing it. But in this passage, we hear the accent. So I'm going to read. Piet and Jaap had just come home, and they were very wet. Such awful weather, I said. But Piet, responding to my remark, said, "Oh, no," he exclaimed. His clothes were plastered to him, his ravaged umbrella tucked under his arm. He was powerfully exhilarated. "You forget, Holland is very wet. For us, this weather is home." Simultaneously, Jaap was pawing the air with great energetic gestures, like a swimmer carving his way up through a waterfall. It was like swimming. Rainwater sprayed in every direction from the force of his movements. He was like a Saint Bernard coming in from the original flood. Bansi, the butler, wriggled behind and around Jaap, narrowly escaping being brained. He had a pained expression on his face. He disappeared towards the kitchen to organize their lunch. "It was like swimming," continued Jaap, "like swimming through people." "It was fantastic," said Piet. "The water some places, it was this high." He indicated about mid-thigh. "And the road, it was a river." Jaap said, "We saw at one place a whirlpool." And all kinds of things disappearing into it. Further slurping sounds and a long, slow burp. They both burst into gusty laughs. A child, 2 cows, 1 car. Pete said, "We saw dogs, you know?" And he looked suddenly at me to make sure I was following all this. He made gestures to suggest a dog swimming frantically, arms and legs churning, swimming and swimming and swimming to get away from the whirlpool. Yap took it on. And then the boss would come and this big, he described a tidal wave, you know, and all the people, the poor people, you know, the people waiting for the bus, you know. He ducked, his large features distorted wildly to show the compound fear of patient commuters faced with the prospect of sudden death by drowning. And then the bus would stop, you know, and the people would fight to get on to the bus, said Pete. And the umbrellas going up and down, said pumping at invisible umbrella shafts. And the people fighting to get off the bus, said Pete, battling a vigorous horde of would-be passengers. In the twilit dining room of Palm View, the house in which we lived, his huge arms described great sweeping circles. Bunsey, who had just reappeared with a steaming dish, ducked nimbly once more. "Lunch ready," he said sternly.
Oh, what a treat. I must say, the Maharishi Guru being referred to as the Mash Ji Hoo had me laughing like a drain, laughing out loud while I was reading it. And Manjula, is there another passage perhaps later in the book, since it's a book of travel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this is, as you can see, much later in the book. This is when eventually what happens in the book is I make a program, a secret program just for myself to visit Holland and to visit these 2 people. And I'm staying in the house of the person called of Pete. And he lived in a home with his 5 siblings, his mother, grandmother, and the grandmother had a fondness for birds. She had a flock of geese and ducks and so on. She had other birds as well. And this passage is when I've been in Holland for some time. I had become to understand that my reasons for being in Holland were based on all kinds of misconceptions about who I was, who they were, and why, etc. I was there. Anyway, so in this passage, I'm stuck in Holland because I don't have money to get out. I don't have a return ticket. And I am deeply concerned about what lies ahead. So I'm going to start this. So, however much I thought of Pete as a hook onto which I could hang my problems of self-definition, I had to recognize that he himself was hooked onto other things. And in particular, another person, in this case, a guru, whom I disliked and who disliked me. As I sat there, my attention was caught by a plaintive, mewing honk. I had heard it before, I realized. But this time I noticed that it came from outside the window, upstairs, and I went to the window, pushing aside the monstera leaves, and realized that I was looking out over the backyard of the house. The sound, the honking sound, was of the peacock calling. The grandmother of the house had a peacock. The sound was of the peacock calling. I wondered why it was making the effort, considering that it had neither a mate nor any competitors in sight. Then I understood. The cars on the busy street on the other side of the garden gate occasionally honked their horns. The peacock called whenever it heard the sound of a car horn. I felt my spirit shrink with pain. In the peacock's fate, I glimpsed a parody of my own. I too was responding to signals which were not intended for me. I had followed Pete to Holland, thinking that I would be able to find clues to the puzzle of myself by studying the lives of others who seemed similar to me. When I felt upbeat, it was because I believed that I'd done well by myself and had made the right choices. But at other times, I saw that I was as confused and ignorant of the true nature of my companions as a captive peacock mistaking car horns for the calls of fellow peacocks. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you for that reading. And it's such a delight to hear it actually from the author's voice. It's unusual for an autobiography to cover just a 2-year period. I mean, of course, you can't really call it a fragment of autobiography because the writing is complete in itself, but it covers, a short period of your life. And you have, clearly revised it, reread it, and republished it in this last year, which is interesting to me. Is this, in your mind, the most formative period of your life? I know that, formative years are meant to be late adolescence, etc., and they rarely are. We're far too young at that age. Did you consider these crucial, these months this year?
No.
Okay.
I would say that the year and a half of this trip, and I call it a travel memoir. The only reason I emphasize autobiography is that I used to be told, oh, but it reads like a novel, but it's not a novel. I wouldn't say they were formative. I would say that this experience of, I was kind of running away from home. My family didn't know where I was in the world. They didn't know where I was for 3 months. And I remember my mother sent a message to Interpol to try and track me. I wouldn't call it a formative period. I would say that it was a turning point of sorts, but anyone who knows me will know that I speak of many turning points. There were a number of turning points. So this was one. I wouldn't say it was the most crucial one, but I think perhaps what it did for me is it gave me, in a peculiar way, considering that everything went wrong in the trip, it gave me the evidence of a very complex plan, a plan that involves people and a lot of deception, family and friends, deception to get what I want, and yet, and you can fail. I would say that it was very much a failed trip. It was practically a catastrophe, and you can come away from that. You can fall down and get up again. And I would say that is the powerful lesson I learned from this trip.
Right.
And it gave me in a strange way, a lot of confidence. I would say more confidence than if it had gone the way I wanted it to go.
Manjula, the reprinting of Getting There has received a fair amount of press and reader attention, and possibly more than it did in its initial run. Do you have any reason that you could assign as to why this phenomena is?
I'm pretty sure I know why. At the time, it came out with Picador India published it I think in 2000 or maybe 1999, I forget. At that time, I think it was too odd and unusual a narrative, and for the readers of that time, it just seemed bizarre that anyone I'm putting that in quotation marks, anyone like me would that is a nice young woman from a respectable family would just suddenly leap up and run to Holland, chasing after 2 men. I mean, it was just that. I was chasing men. I was not pretending to. I mean, I might have called it a spiritual quest, but it was also a kind of romantic quest. It was just considered too bizarre and unpleasant, unattractive, and unseemly behavior. I think in today's world, there are very many young women who would like to do the same thing. And even though, I mean, I am one of the young people who commented on the book to me, that is, I don't think she was a reviewer, or maybe she was. I think one of the things she said was, she makes the point, I don't think I agree with her, but she makes the point that I seemed not to realize how privileged I was to even be able to destroy my life, which I think is what she was saying, that it's a privilege to be, to even want to, and then perhaps even partially succeed in destroying my life. Well, I'm not sure that that requires any privilege, but I see the point she's making. And the thing is, today's young women can actually dream of destroying their lives.
Extraordinary thought. What about the title? You call it Getting There. Would you say that in some sense you have now arrived? And this publication of the 3 volumes that we're looking at today, is it a kind of a retrospective for you?
I think that's a good point. I would say, yeah, but I'm still getting there. I'm not gone. And I would like to hope, in fact, that one is always getting there. One is always in progress, not stuck.
Not having arrived. Okay, we must move on to your to the second hat, the playwright side of you, and Harvest in particular. We can't. I know it was your 5th play, but we've got to start by discussing it because it really put you on the map. I think it's fair to say when you won the first prize at the the first time that this prize was given to you by the Onassis Foundation in Greece. And this was in an early publication of, not the recent one, but you'd done a standalone publication of
yes,
which I also have. In that you spoke about your complete surprise at getting the first prize. How, when they phoned you to say that you were among the 10 last, sort of the people in the short list, you thought, oh, that's fine, I've reached. And then the embassy had to call you. I was very interested in that because I wondered which of the 2 things is the correct interpretation. Is this a sign of your not having very much concern with the reception of a work once you've finished it, once you've done it? Or is it just your modesty regarding your accomplishments that you didn't expect to win the first prize?
Oh, no. I wouldn't say it was either of those. Okay. I would say I was just looking at the unlikelihood of an obscure playwright from the third world winning. It is not winning an international prize, which what can I say? It is worth a lot of money, and it was a giant kind of affirmation in a way that it's like. Actually, this is something I say to, if I get a chance, I make the point that it is important to dream large, because if you consider the trajectory of how I came to win that prize, I saw an advertisement this big, a tiny advertisement in an obscure Australian playwrights magazine that I had subscribed to because. Again, I'd gone to Australia in 1994. I asked a friend to send me to subscribe for me to a quarterly magazine. In the final issue of that quarterly magazine, I saw this minute advertisement, and it caught my eye about the Onassis competition in Greece. And instead of thinking, oh well, what does that have to do with me? Instead, I thought, ooh, that looks like fun. And I thought of the play, I wrote the play, I sent it off at the end of June 96. I was later told it was practically the last play to get in it had to arrive by the 30th of June, and it did. I was told that was the last play in under the door. And then I knew that it would, once having sent it, I wouldn't hear from them for a long time, because they said the results would only be announced in 95. And I openly confess that I thought about it every single day. I thought, is it, what are the chances? What are the chances? So whenever it was, I think it was May, I forget, I got this call in the morning, and I could hear that it was an international call. And the person calling said, she wanted to speak to me, and she asked for a fax number. And I said, I don't have a fax, whatever. And in the course of this conversation, I became aware that, yes, it was on the short list. And it was only when she said that I understood that there were 1,400 other plays from around the world in the competition. And I thought, 1,400 plays, What are the chances? The chances are, just infinitesimal that my play could possibly win against competition, and that it was 10th, one of 10 was, I realized I should feel very grateful. And I was. So 2 months later, when I got a second call, it was like, I've often been told, it must have been like winning the lottery. It was a bit, except that in this case, I didn't just buy a ticket, I wrote something. And
a lot of work went into it, I'm sure.
I felt very, very grateful. And I know that, and I say this to anyone, any creative person, anyone who works hard to do what they do, there's never any guarantee. And I certainly have never felt that I deserved anything. We all work hard, but we don't all succeed. And if one does succeed, then one has to be, more than anything else, one has to be grateful. There's no such thing as guaranteed success. You can be very clever, very gifted, and get no recognition. And if I have got recognition, I'm grateful. And I realize that in every possible way, it is also earned alongside millions of others who don't. Okay. So I'm grateful. And my point to anyone who has dreams is believe in them.
So this is inspiring as well as sobering. I think it's very important what you've just said. Mm-hmm. There's some aspect of being a playwright that I wanted to ask you about. You work without a theatre group, which is, I think, much more the case with people who work with plays. They have a particular group who sort of brainstorm and try out performances, etc. Yeah. Since playwriting is the most interactive of any possible literary pursuit, is this a personal choice to work virtually, in virtual seclusion, and as you have done so far? Mm-hmm.
No, it's not a choice. No playwrights in their right mind would choose to work alone. It is, as you say, incredibly limiting at one level. But in Delhi, when, as you say, Harvest was my 5th play, Lights Out was the first. And when I wrote Lights Out, it was performed maybe a year and a half or 2 years after I wrote it. Mm-hmm. I did not realize at the time how unusual that is. That is for a playwright to write a play and for it to be performed. I thought, well, it just follows, as a natural progression, but no, it does not. At the time I wrote Harvest, and by that time I knew very, very well that you might write any number of plays, but unless you have support, it's not just a theatre group. You also have to have an audience that is interested in your work. And if you don't have either, and in my mm-hmm. case, I did have neither, it's very, very unlikely that you will see your plays performed. And I would, when people ask me if I'm thought of as successful, and when people ask me what I credit my success to, I often say I'm extremely obstinate. I don't give up. And I think anyone else who, I don't know, creative people are very obstinate. Creative people do often believe in themselves, despite the fact that nobody else does. So I would say that the theatre world in Delhi, even though I was, I had a few friends, and my beloved friend Sunita Paul was a tremendous. She published the edition of Getting There You Have in Your Hand, and Zuban, at that time, Kali for Women, published that book. I have a lot of friends who supported me, but theater groups, I found that they, even though they might find my plays in quotes interesting, they knew that they wouldn't get funding to perform them.
I can imagine, because they ask the difficult questions. And as you yourself have said, I'm quoting you, perhaps not accurately, but what you have said is that I have understood that people who don't buy theater tickets to have a harangue, to listen to, which I can see that you have to find a balance between needing to say important things and entertainment that an audience expects. Is that?
Yeah.
I also wanted to touch, because I know that, I wish we had more time together, but because we'll run out of time soon, I wanted to ask about all the different things you do. You're a cartoonist, you're an illustrator of, you're a very famous cartoonist, because Sukiyaki is just read by everybody. And I'm so happy to see that it's still being published in a newspaper in Chennai. There's also your art, which illustrates books. There's also, I believe, you've also done gallery showings of art of a different sort, and then you have the plays and then the prose, etc. Can you give me any explanation for such disparate activities all coming out of one center?
I've often said that it is no different to having a computer that has two kinds of software, that is word processing software and graphic software. It's not any different to that. It's not I don't consider it to be particularly unusual. And I again often make the point that, whereas I'm often told, oh, you do so many things. Whereas, I look at my friends and almost everyone I know can drive. I don't drive. I don't know how to drive. I am, in living in the US, I've had to learn a little bit of cooking, but it is not a skill I have. And what I say is most of my friends are able to drive and talk and even eat while driving. Whereas all I can do is I can write and draw. It isn't very much in the long run.
Well, in your writing as well, there's such a combination of being able to see the darker side and the more, as well as I was saying, you had me laughing out loud while reading your last book. What would you say about the combination of the two ways of handling life as you see it, fitting together, the humorous side, the very, very serious and dark side, which you acknowledge?
I think a lot of comedians would tell you that comedy is serious business. Most comedians are in person are quite morose because they and maybe I include myself, learn to laugh at all that is dark in life. It's not forced. I think I'm naturally good humored, but it's not at all that I don't see. Of course, I see things, and it's possible that as someone who has lived a little an untraditional life, it gives me a vantage point from which to look at others. So I would say that I spent all my life, I'm 67 years old, I'm not young. I've had a very long time in which to observe a huge parade of life. My father was in the Foreign Service. We lived in different countries when I was growing up. I returned to India. My father retired when I was 16. So there were big changes in my life, and I saw life through a slightly different lens to what I would say most people do, because I wasn't kind of immersed in family. I wasn't completely overwhelmed by the needs and expectations of my family, which I think perhaps is what millions of people, how millions of people grow up completely sheltered and also affected by their family. I would say I was not. And in that sense, I've had a chance, and some would say that it's been a drawback, that I don't have the automatic connection and the rootedness that other people have. But I'm I have some wonderful relationships which are very important to me, in particular my two sisters and my partner, who will remain unnamed. And I would say I've been rich in friendships and relationships. So
when you're translating this this vision and the viewpoints that you have garnered over this very interesting journey of your life, when you are translating them into literary presentations, do you keep an audience in mind? I know you write sometimes for young adults, as in astronauts, that the play, as well as for adults. There's the cartoons. What do you have in mind when you're writing?
Well, I became very conscious of audience, of the concept of an audience, when, as a young I was still doing my BA and about to start on my MA. I did a BA in economics and an MA in history. And while I was doing my MA, I was a terrible student, I must add here. Okay. I was never interested in academics. I'm sorry, all academics listening to this. I was a terrible student. But I was working for a small magazine called Parsiana in Bombay. It's still in existence. And my editor there was a hugely inspiring person, and still is, called Jahangir Patel. He was a wonderful editor, and I believe still is. And working as a journalist was, I would say, the crucial thing that opened my mind to the concept of writing with the reader in mind. I think all good journalists, at any rate, do that. Good journalists must always be conscious of the reader. What the reader is going to understand, what part of what you write is going to make sense to the particular reader you're writing for. And being conscious of that is a little bit like being an actor. Always conscious of the audience. You can't not know the audience, especially if you're a journalist, because everything you write appears the next morning. And you'll know within a day or two, you'll get feedback. And the fact of writing particularly a comic strip, when I did one for the Sunday Observer, it got a lot of negative feedback. And I remember the wonderful editor, Vinod Mehta, who was my editor, the first editor for comics. I remember him saying, because we got this negative feedback, and I said to him, do you want me to stop the strip? And he said, if it bothers you, you can stop. But in his opinion, negative feedback was the best kind of feedback, because you knew that a reader really felt something strong to make the effort of putting down his or her thoughts on a little postcard and putting a stamp on it and sending it, because of course it took that much effort in those days. Yes. And that if people care that much to hate something, it's something to value.
Okay. And what an interesting viewpoint. And is the journalist in you coming out when you write plays like Lights Out? If we can just touch on the subject matter of that very briefly, it is so unusually presented, the idea of rape taking place in a public, in a public spot, which is witnessed by several people, and yet I thought this showed such finesse. The rape is never dramatized; it is never on the stage. You don't see it, and then of course the question mark of the rapist. No retribution assigned to them as well. No, you're more interested in the reaction of the people watching this.
I would say that Lights Out was it. A friend told me, a friend who was an eyewitness to the rape. It was a gang rape, and she was obviously very shocked by what she saw. it's not that she told me because of it. It was many months later. We just happened to be talking. And then she mentioned this incident. And initially, I felt it had to be written about in the newspapers. It had to be a news account. And when I talked to editors about it, they said, but there are no, no one will admit to it. The owner of the apartment building, no one will admit. And it all happened in the past. And I remember my very dear friend Rekha Khanna saying to me, she just said, she had the intuition to say, write a play. And when she said that, I thought, well, yeah, that's right. A play is a very public statement.
Yes.
So I wrote Lights Out as a piece of journalism. I wrote it in order to share a story.
It comes across. That's exactly. And very soon after that, you wrote the Mating Game about dowry debts.
Mating Game show. Yeah.
And, it makes one wonder, of course, they are dealing with contemporary problems, but the way they're presented in both cases, the problem seems to be, to have gone on for a very, very long time. And this is the current version of age-old problems.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that the questions have started coming in. I'm sorry if you'd like to comment on that, and then I will ask the question.
No, let's see the questions.
Okay. Has the recognition, Arunji asks, has the recognition you received ever been a hurdle while doing later work or plays?
I would say not at all, because I would not say that the recognition has been of the limiting sort. I think when, I would say I am an obscure writer who happens to have a small audience. So no, I would not say it's been limiting at all.
Okay. And Tarun Saint has a very interesting question. He speaks about harvest being an aspect of science fiction to some extent, and it's an overlap between realism and science fiction. And could Manjula say a bit more about the tense relationship between science fiction and fiction in general?
Yes, of course. As someone who writes a lot of science fiction, I would say that one of the greatest problems that science fiction writing certainly in India, if not in the whole of South Asia, has faced is that many serious readers consider science fiction to be a kind of lowbrow genre, whereas I would say it has, at least for me, it has proven to be an extremely sophisticated tool for talking about complex ideas. And I would not hesitate to say that Harvest is science fictional. It is wholly science fictional. And that it gave me, working with science fiction gave me the freedom to explore concepts without having to set up a mechanism that would be a bit difficult to get to in standard fiction. So I would say, it's a great tool.
So here's yet another dimension of your writing. Manjula, a lot of research has, I think, there's been a great deal of interest of late in doing research on your work. And now that we have a published compendium of your plays and access. I understand that in the tradition, in the great Shakespearean tradition, you revise your plays all the time. And as if you go through the folio and Porto, you see that they were side notes and and changes being made right till the last minute, which I suppose is the nature of theatre. But now that we have published printed versions of your play and the research can begin on a body of your work, do you welcome this? Do you like the idea that people might research it, or do you feel it restrictive?
Oh yes, of course I welcome it. I want to say about the rewriting, playwrights don't have to make much of an effort to rewrite, because believe me, the production teams will rewrite the play while they perform it. They'll add things, they'll remove things. I don't enjoy that. But I will say though that it is an extraordinary privilege to have such a large number of plays. It's 6 long plays and 20, I think it's 20 or 21 short ones, suddenly appearing all together in a double volume of collected plays. That is thanks to Hachette India, and I'm hugely grateful to them for being willing to put money behind one of the types of publishing that routinely loses money for publishers. That's
Yes.
theater and plays. And I think the only form that gets even less attention is poetry. So between, I'm very grateful that I'm not also a poet, because then two very difficult ventures. I'm not a poet. But
I'd like to
yes.
ask, before they cut us off completely, about the performance pieces, distinct from the plays. Your second volume, Laughter and Blood, is performance pieces. Now, like the short story, as opposed to, we know that a short story isn't a chapter out of a novel.
Sure.
Similarly, the short pieces have demands that they make of their own.
Yes. I mean,
can you tell us a little?
Yes, short performance pieces are a wonderful vehicle for a short thought. I'm sorry if that sounds too pat and too kind of obvious, but I think many of us have had have maybe on a bus journey had an idea for seen something that they feel would be good for something short, but it's difficult to create, to know how to make a story out of something seen and experienced. Well, I would say short performance pieces are an extraordinary vehicle for doing that, but of course, the problem is, how do you get anyone to perform them? I will say here, however, and again, I'm making a plug here for the Prakriti Foundation, which is performing some of my, or either extracts or whole piece of performance pieces in the course of this year, once a month at the end of the month. So on the final Saturday of every month, Prakriti Foundation, with the wonderful participation of different theatre groups and actors in India, are performing these short plays. And not just in India, in that there are 4 teams from the US. So, I'm just very grateful, very, very glad. And I hope, I think this is the whole point. I hope it inspires others to try their hand.
I have stacks of more questions, but no more time. So thank you so much, Manjula. Thank you. This has been really a very enlightening exchange.
Thank you, Jayanti. Thank you, the JLF. Thank you, Sanjoy, who has come back online.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jayanti Seth. And thank you, Manjula. And for those of you watching, if you can pick up a copy of Harvest or Lights Out or any of Manjula's plays, let me tell you, they're powerful pieces of work.
For sure.
They go beyond just theater in its very essence. It tells you truths that are much needed today. So thank you so much, Manjula Padmanabhan, for being part of this. And we have, as part of META, the Mahindra Excellence in Theatre Awards, we've now started publishing the best original play every year as a publication, because we do believe that you do need to make that effort to get it out to people, for theatre groups across the world, if possible, to access plays. And we're working on another scheme around plays, but more of that when we speak later. More strength to you. Continue to both showing us all of the wonderful satirical work that we see through your cartoons, and of course, your wonderful writing. Thank you, Jayanti Seth. Thank you all for watching. I'm sorry we couldn't take all the questions. As you could see, there was just so much conversation that our speakers today were engaged in. Many apologies for that, but we hope you will log back on Friday, the 18th of December for our next set of sessions. We begin with the Brass Notebook, Devaki Jain, in conversation with Malashri Lal. Devaki Jain, as many of you will know, is one of the foremost economists in India. She looks back at the trajectory of feminism through a candid memoir in which her personal story interweaves with the development agenda of a new nation. And this will be at 7 p.m. IST, 1:30 p.m. GMT, and 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the next session will be Tracking in the Age of the World Wide Web. Perry Chen and Monica Narula in conversation. Traditionally, trackers were used to lead us to animals, people, or lost geographical features concealed in jungles and wilderness. Today, we need help in navigating the complex and bewildering world of technology. These two speakers in conversation today are aptly poised to clear much of the confusion and the unknowable factors involved in lifting the mists surrounding the virtual world of communication. And that's at 8:30 p.m. IST, 3 p.m. GMT, and 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday. Till then, stay safe, stay masked, and look after yourselves.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.